All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're jumping right into Boris gets arrested and divorced. We are about to dive into a highly dramatic, incredibly fast-paced digital narrative of family conflict and, honestly, extreme justice. This specific brand of storytelling, which comes straight out of the Go Animate and Beyond Animation subcultures, it gives us this fascinating window into how internet communities craft their own intense, hyper-moral soap operas.
I can't believe that I married a selfish, vile, and a cruel man like yourself. We're getting a full divorce. Those are the devastating words from Doris to her husband Boris. And right there, that establishes the severe marital fracture that kicks off our whole story. We are thrown immediately into the deep end of a domestic crisis. There's no slow build-up here at all. The story drops us right smack in the middle of a family dynamic that is completely, irreparably shattered.
But before we unpack that explosive confrontation, we actually need to look at the real-world constraints behind this narrative. The creator of this story, the SpongeBob animator 2K9, faced some grueling technical hurdles before returning to this release. So for 3 months, they were completely inactive. And this was followed by 3 weeks of severe software issues, specifically with something called Wrapper Offline, which is a community-built software tool used to keep making these animations. The character voices just completely stopped working. And to make matters even worse, all their original data and files were lost, which led to scrapped videos and forced the creator to essentially start from scratch.
Okay, let's dive into this breaking point. The core of our narrative revolves around a massive domestic dispute between Boris and his wife Doris regarding the treatment of their children. Basically, Doris interrupts Boris while he's just trying to watch a football game, confronting him about years and years of accumulated grievances. The family is entirely divided here, and what unfolds is a rapid, systematic deconstruction of Boris as both a father and a husband.
Because there's a stark visual contrast in Boris's parenting. On one side, we have the first Caillou, who is bald and suffers from a medical condition. Boris's treatment of him is just horrific. We're talking abuse, severe neglect, and shocking physical harm, like literally making him fall down the stairs. But on the other side, we have the second Caillou, also known as Hair Caillou. Boris treats this second child like an absolute innocent angel, showering him with all the love and kindness that he actively withholds from his first son. So this situation rapidly escalates as Doris just unloads a sheer volume of specific and frankly bizarre grievances against Boris. She accuses him of belittling the first Caillou for a condition he can't even control. She claims Boris planted a device in his hand, and then later she mentions his head while actively wishing the kid was dead. And these accusations expand beyond just the first Caillou. We find out Boris also neglected another child named Rosie, rewarded characters named Cameron and Max for their misdeeds, and even somehow got the first Caillou arrested for getting Boris arrested. It's a dizzying amount of plot points, but it paints a clear picture of total household chaos.
Now, confronted with this massive list of failures, you'd think Boris might apologize. Nope. He doubles down. He flat out states, "The second Caillou is like a real son to me, and an innocent angel. I wish the first Caillou wasn't in our lives anymore." This unapologetic admission is the definitive proof Doris needs. Hearing her own husband openly wish for his son's removal from their lives, that pushes her past the point of no return. She immediately demands full custody and a divorce.
So the narrative shifts directly to the courtroom. The family's intensely private dysfunction is now officially a matter of public legal record. The judge calls the court into session to formally evaluate the extensive charges against Boris, and things get very serious.
Doris takes the stand first. Her testimony systematically breaks down Boris's character before the judge. She reiterates his lack of love and compassion, but then she introduces a specific formalized concept of his abuse: punishment days. She tells the court that Boris consistently subjected his first son to these designated periods of torment, treating him horribly, and reiterates his desire for the child's death. She also makes sure to bring up his intense favoritism toward the Hair Caillou.
Following Doris, the first Caillou himself takes the stand. This brings an incredibly intense, emotional stake to the proceedings. He looks directly at his father and declares, "Dad, you are the worst parent that I ever had in my life. All you ever do is treat me like trash, injure me, and always punish me 24/7. He explicitly tells his father he hates him, never wants to see him again, and expresses profound relief that his mother is finally filing for divorce.
Boris actually attempts to apologize here, but it's completely ineffective. The first Caillou cuts him right off and rapid-fires a series of devastating, unanswerable interrogations at his pleading father. He demands to know, "Are you really sorry that you keep berating me for having cancer and for being bald?" He totally questions the sincerity of Boris's apologies for those relentless punishment days and for telling him he should never have existed in the first place.
And then he asks this stark, chilling question. Are you sorry for why my face looks like this? That single line illustrates a deep, dark physical history of abuse implied within this text. The first Caillou completely ignores Boris's pleas for forgiveness. He answers his own questions by stating flatly that Boris is not sorry at all, formally declaring his own father guilty right from the witness stand.
The tension in the courtroom reaches its absolute peak. The judge has heard enough. Having weighed the testimonies detailing years of emotional and physical torment, the judge prepares to deliver the final decision on the formal charges leveled against Boris: child abuse, child neglect, and torture.
And this brilliantly illustrates the uncompromising justice of this universe. The judge outlines a swift, permanent, and two-part sentence. Step 1, Boris is formally divorced, and Doris is granted full legal custody of the children. Step 2, for his crimes of abuse and torture, Boris Anderson is sentenced to life in prison with absolutely no possibility of parole. There's no prolonged trial, no appeals process. The justice delivered is swift and absolute.
We immediately transition to the fallout outside the courtroom. With Boris being dragged away to begin his life sentence, the entire family dynamic shifts. Herr Caillou, who, remember, was previously favored by Boris, begins to throw a massive tantrum about his father's fate. He's complaining like a baby, according to his mother, but Doris, who is now the sole authority figure, immediately shuts it down.
When they return home, Doris addresses Herr Caillou's history of bullying the first Caillou, and she delivers a punishment that is absolutely legendary within the specific digital subculture: the infinite grounding. The word is repeated over and over: grounded, 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 culminating in the absolute finality of forever. She orders him to his room immediately, representing the ultimate, inescapable form of discipline.
Doris finalizes Herr Caillou's eternal punishment with this wonderfully specific, visceral phrasing. She calls him a cancer shamer, don't shame jerk. It's an incredibly raw and blunt condemnation of his behavior towards his brother's medical condition. And with this, the domestic side of the story is resolved. The toxic father is gone, the bullying brother is locked in his room forever, and the first Caillou is finally safe.
For our final act, we cut to Boris in his jail cell. He's lost his wife, his kids, and his freedom, and he's wondering aloud how his life could possibly get any worse. Well, he's about to find out, because Boris is about to discover that a life sentence handed down by a judge definitely doesn't protect him from this past catching up to him on the inside.
See, the other prison inmates have heard exactly why Boris is locked up with them, and they confront him. They bring up deep lore from the narrative, like a fake apology video Boris apparently made, calling him one big internet lie. But much more chillingly, they bring context to the first Caillou's earlier courtroom question about his face. The inmates explicitly state that Boris disfigured his son's face with a rock prank, declaring it one of the most unforgivable things a parent can ever do.
The inmates express profound anger over the depression and trauma Boris caused his son. They decide that the judge's life sentence simply isn't enough, so they rally together. With absolute seriousness, an inmate declares, "Let's teach this child-abusing scumbag a lesson he'll never forget." The prison population essentially takes matters into their own hands, preparing to administer their own brutal, physical justice to Boris right there in the cell. Which brings us to our conclusion and a lingering thought. We've just watched a family tear itself apart, leading to life sentences, infinite groundings, and vigilante prison beatings. It leaves us with a real question. Is this absolute, uncompromising vengeance the only way to restore order in this chaotic digital universe? It's a bizarre, incredibly fast-paced narrative, but it gives us such a fascinating look into how extreme justice is crowdsourced and portrayed in these online spaces. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.